Hey.
That hits so hard.
I'm excited.
I love this effect. It's super simple visually.
Really cool lyric as well.
But sometimes life takes me down.
I love black and white and red.
Yeah.
And I'm in distress. Can't take a rest. Should I push on?
Okay.
On the land. This is true or that. Have I lost it all?
Bring the vocals.
Some familiar.
The bass noises that come out of his face hole are so good.
And I'm in distress. Can't take a rest. Should I push on? But I put my life and persevere. So I say, bring it on.
Nice.
Cause you haven't seen the best of me.
Nice.
I'm turning views as we speak. I've carved the dump, rush to the top. I can't give up.
Oh god.
This boy gon' shine. Just wait and see.
It bothered me how that last one didn't run.
Nice. No. What?
Hey.
That's so good, man.
And now in distress, can't take a rest. Should I push on? But I put my life and persevere. So I say, bring it on. Cause I take my burdens on. First down.
What?
To the ground to
Hey.
say, bring it on, baby. This boy is on
That hits so hard.
Disappointing you in this boy, this is my crown.
Alright.
I do feel like I can actually comment on some of the singing here.
I mean, I would hope.
Yeah, right? I think there are certain things that might be stylistically intentional, but
I can't be.
I mean, he's not.
But sometimes.
Right, but we're going to be seeing more singing in beatboxing, I think. So I think it's appropriate to talk about. I know he's not a singer, and I know he has sick bass, and I know he's a sick talent. So, like, yeah, no, huge asterisks on all of this.
Not to say you shouldn't critique it, but
it's not about critiquing. It's more about learning opportunities for people.
I can't be.
that's sort of what I was.
Yeah. No, I know that's what you're getting at. I'm just retentive about the wording of it. So oftentimes when I talk about watching out for consonants in beatboxing while you're trying to sing, usually the example is people doing it really well. This is where we're actually going to see some consequences of it.
To be the best I can be.
So the pitch is not like cent perfect after the C.
I can't be, but sometimes.
And every time you get like a hard consonant, watch how the pitch drops just a bit. It's hard to notice even, but it drops just a bit.
Sometimes life takes me down and pushes me to the ground. And I'm in distress.
Now this is cool though. So this is actually really cool. And this is not the first time we talked about this, but I really, really like it. And it's a very, very beatbox idiomatic thing, which is probably why I love it so much.
Pushes me to the ground. And I'm in distress.
So anytime you make it sound like all of that, you're bringing your false folds closer together to kind of get that really like tight, like gritty sound. And so what he's doing is he's keeping that aesthetic for when he sings. I keep it to the ground. Like, you know, something like that is an exaggeration. Like, we're getting into Axl Rose territory if it gets too ridiculous. But, like, I don't do that. I sing opera, which is, like, the false folds are in the opposite direction almost for everything I do. But this is cool, though. And this is something you can totally steal as a beatboxer. One thing that you would want to do is when you do this, make sure that you're not using a lot of air in the same way that the consonants can trip you up. So can some certain sounds like you got to be careful of using too much air. So you gotta back it up when you do this for singing.
And I'm in distress. Can't take a rest. You can't push on.
Now, interesting, push as like it's a plosive consonant. It's a hard consonant, as in it like hits hard. P, right? But what he does here to make up for it's funny, he makes a really appropriate adjustment because he's trying to go higher. So he actually raises his larynx, which is actually quite cool that he intuited that. So that U is actually really nicely on pitch because he's raising his larynx to kind of alleviate some of the pressure.
My life on the land. This is true or that. Have I lost it all?
And this is just disgusting.
I imagine that's a counter I don't understand.
Yeah, probably.
These like sound familiar.
Yeah. This is just nasty. I want to get into the singing at the end. I actually think this, if I recall, the singing at the end was actually a little bit better.
Hey.
That's so nasty.
There were a couple of times in this where I think he screws up a tiny bit and there's a bit of timing mistakes some places to the point where I'm surprised he didn't like re-record some of it. But
I mean, it's so minor. The other thing that is really cool, I want to see this more from beatboxers when people use resonance for clucks. Like, if you're able to do that, you can get a lot more sound when you're singing without having to adjust your false folds and use less air and stuff like that. Because like, there's a big difference between to the ground versus to the ground, to the ground. And that's not me. That's just adjusting vowels in the vocal track. To the ground, right? Big difference. And then I'm putting the vibrato at the end out of habit. But there's a big difference there. And I want, like, Butterscotch does it really well. MB14 does it really well. And then Warlet, but that's because she's like a singer. But anyway, so I want to see more of it.
Cool taste there. Very interesting rhythmically, like dun dun dun.
Oh, yeah.
Can't take a rest. You can't push on. But I put my life and persevere. So I say bring it on, 'cause I take my word and don't fight first and word into the ground to say bring it on, baby. This boy is on fire. Was
Okay, so this is actually super smart. This is actually super smart and adjusts for the same obstacle of hard consonants and then singing afterwards in a very, very, very different way. I'm actually going to bring out a diagram here because it's like really, really good. So when you have, I'll move this over here. When you have your folds, the way that you bring your folds together, for the most part, is you use air. There are other factors to bringing things closer, but largely what we're talking about is the Bernoulli effect. So what is the Bernoulli effect? It's this. I'm going to put, oops, there we go. I'm going to put these pieces of paper close together. And as I blow through them, the papers come together, right? So when we talk about singing and the difficulty of using very intense vowels, air pressure is building up when you close your lips or when you're like using like every time you try to hold that. And that's desirable in beatboxing because you want things to hit hard. But the consequence there is that there's too much breath, and so the folds are way too thick. Way too thick. So what he does at the end, which I think is really cool, is he's still getting really thick folds to make those sounds, but then he does what's called an aspirate, which is a and that sound immediately blows open the folds at even if it's too much air, and or even if it's just the right amount of air, you don't blow them open, but you do separate them. Right? So that, to me, is really smart. And again, I don't know if he's being deliberate. I don't know if he knows this, but he's doing it. Right? So even if he intuited it, that's really, really good. So just to give respect right there.
He probably intuited it.
I would imagine. Yeah.
trying to say bring it on, baby. This boy is on fire. Was born with them fine drum.
And then you can actually hear it again when he stops doing it.
Would you say you think he's sort of holding back a little bit?
I think he's doing that on purpose because if it's the same thing, right?
I think he could go a little more though.
Well, that's what I was saying is that I think that I don't think like, so if you go a little bit more, and we were talking about this earlier in the stream, let's get the larynx up. So if you do any of the following, you're kind of screwing yourself. If you do the thyroid tilt, well, yeah, but you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing and then go into throat bass and then come out of it clean. So, yeah, exactly. So,
I screwed up because I went from inward bass to throat bass instead of just my normal voice.
Right. But there's still obstacles here, right? So the thyroid cartilage, so when you go up, the thyroid cartilage is one way to thin out your folds, right? They get really stretched out like that. But because they get stretched out, they're taut. They don't vibrate floppy anymore. And that gets in the way of beatbox sounds a tremendous amount, right? So you don't want to do that. Or if you do, you want to be able to switch out of it remarkably fast. Of all people, actually, Mariah Carey does it very well. So the other one is a cricoid cartilage tilt. And because it tilts this way, it actually shortens and fattens the folds. Same problem. They're not going to flop around anymore. They're really tight and fat like that. So the only thing you can do when you're going up, unless you're switching unbelievably fast, the only way to thin out the folds is to raise the larynx. So when you say, okay, he's holding back, it does sound like that because raising the larynx without a tilt inherently is a more meek sound. So if I do, let's see, na, right, and then I do it just raising my larynx, na, na, right? But what's happening that's even makes this sound even more meek would be that people are raising their larynx a lot and then they're not using vowels to adjust their vocal tract, right? So na na na, right? At the end, I tilted my thyroid cartilage, but even just lifting my soft palate there changes the tone quite dramatically. So that's why it sounds like he's holding back, is because he's he's making these adjustments but doesn't exactly know how to orient the vocal tract for maximum resonance. Anyway, that was a long spiel. Okay. Anyway, gotta go.